to keep our conversations here relevant, engaging, something that you could think about even after the show. It's not for entertainment, it's for education, or maybe both, edutainment, so that you can stay engaged and have something to reflect on. We now have as our guests representatives from the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We have its current president, Mr. Nikita Usher, as well as its, I think she's the legal consultant. She's Miss Longsworth. And we also have Mr. William Usher. And so I welcome all three of the members. And they're coming by way of Skype. So you will see them coming up on your TV screen. Is everybody hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning and welcome. Welcome to all of you. Let me jump in because of our issue of time. And this is to any one of you. We could start with the president if you like, or if you want to take it as a legal matter with Mrs. Longsworth. I asked our last guest about the fact that the Honorable Cordell Hyde had come out very strongly in support of Nigel Petitio's land movement and made some suggestions that if he were in the position that he would have asked Nigel to identify land throughout the country for the sake of this land distribution for poor Belizeans who have no access or have a very difficult time accessing land. I'd like to know, what is the BCCI's position on this land issue? Any one of you. Maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Usher, Mr. Nikita Usher.
But I know you're breaking up for us when we are listening to you, so we're trying to grasp as best as what we heard.
Okay.
I think your question is in relation to the Nigel Petitio's plight on land.
Yes.
I'm not too certain that I've heard Mr. Cordell Hyde's comment on it, so I won't comment on it, make any comments with regards to that, as I've not heard that. On the issue of you're asking what is the BCCI's position. I think you would accept that land is an issue of government and people. Chamber does not issue land for the first beginning. But I think from where you stand, though, the issue of land with regards to issuance to Belizeans or people who qualify for land, there's a process to follow for that. I do accept that we have large plots of land in business individuals or individual persons who have not perhaps developed the land. It's a matter of enforcement, though, because for the most part, you and I would be aware that when you have a piece of land that is awarded by government, there's a prescribed time in which you have to have development on the land, and you cannot really purchase unless you have done development. That's from a lease standpoint, from a government issuance. However, when you have people buying it off the market, it's a little different because then there is no time frame in which you have to develop that land. So one has to be very cagey in which land are we referring to in doing that. Certainly, there's a need for land across the entire country, and very shortly, I believe we'll have that shortage starting to step in if it's not already there. But certainly, we want to have development in this country, and development means land availability for development to occur. Agriculture requires land, and therefore, I think from that standpoint, we would support to have as many persons as possible developing their land to its maximum.
All right, well,
Unless Mr. wants to comment.
Yeah, I think perhaps I could rephrase the question in this way, that people accessing land has been a major problem even before independence. People stand in line, people go to Belmopan, people go through a number of changes, and people still don't feel that they have access to get land and to own land in Belize. There are people who tell you that they've been waiting for 30 years to try and get a piece of land. This idea of coming out of Nigel Petillo, and we don't have to name a name. It's a movement of people who are saying, look, we need to find another way to do this. This way here is just not, it's not working. And so I'd like you to ask from that position, do you support this idea that there is a need for some way to redistribute land to ensure that Belizeans would get access to land? Maybe we'll hear from Ms. Longsworth and the other Mr. Usher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nori. I think that based on the situation, and you gave a very good historic aspect of the evolution of what has happened, we can zero in on the fact that availability of land has not been the issue. Belize is very rich in land. Land management and distribution, as you rightly said, has been the issue throughout several decades. The issue, of course, with that is that once a government has decided to turn crown lands into private land, that process is practically, irreversible. I mean, there would have to be actual acquisition, forced acquisition, which includes compensation to the parties. And we have seen some scandalous compensations happen in the past as well. And so the question at this point in time, I can understand the movement. And of course, as Mr. President Usher has said, there is not a BCCI position on this. And so we're giving some personal views here. The movement itself does have some warranting behind it because of the lack of the lack of attention that has been paid to the average Belizean having access to land. However, as President rightly said as well, many of our businesses and our huge industries that provide income to the country also depend on very large areas of land. If we start to frighten business people into having to expend to fence thousands of acres of land so that there are not squatters, we're talking about a higher cost of doing business in agriculture, in real estate development. And so in my personal view, as I've said, I think that it will have to go through processes and protocols. And as an attorney, I will always generally stick to the black and white of a situation.
All right, that's fair. Mr. Usher, the other Mr. Usher, Mr. William Usher, would you want to weigh in also before we go to the next question?
No, definitely I can weigh in, and my weight simply is on a personal basis. It has nothing to do with the chamber. I have been a part of the fight of the original Biggie, and so there is no doubt what my perspective of the whole land issue is. And the reality there, my whole issue is more on the speculation aspect of people owning land, but more so how they get those land to start speculating. That really is the crux of the matter, in that it's not equitable in giving fair and equal opportunity to those who, one, would want to speculate if that's what they are doing, but more importantly, to those who actually need a piece of land in order to continue life as normal as a Belizean. As we rightly know from a business standpoint, anytime you want to go into the bank or to do anything to borrow money, it's an issue of a collateral that is needed. And what is the best collateral to have? What does the bank really want? The bank really want land. So if you can do anything in that regard, I think the equitability needs to be shared around. But it's the process of how it goes on within the land department is an issue that I have a problem with. Not necessarily the issue for squatting. I don't condone squatting at all. But policies need to change within the ministry or those who govern land within the country and allow for equitable distribution where necessary.
All right. Thank you all three for weighing in on this. I know this was not a part of what we came here to discuss. I do want to discuss with you these stabilization measures that you have put forward to the public, but it's also important to hear you on these areas that are not necessarily scripted. Another one of the areas is the monopoly of the LPG and the fact that clearly there is only one player in town. Everybody else is a distributor. And what's the thought of the BCCI in accepting that we are now dealing with a monopoly with the import of LPG and distribution likewise? Anyone?
No, I don't know if you can say, I don't know if you can classify it as to say the chamber's acceptance. I think it's more, remember these are laws that are driven up by government, and unless we have a movement to try and put a stoppage to any of these type of laws, we are only one vote among so many that sits on any one committee. That's one, but two we did not even take on that committee. But it's just to show you that it's a government initiative that is being pushed, and so I don't want us to really say acceptance of the chamber. However, let us make sure that we understand clearly, and I am not advocating for any one side. At the end of the day, it is to try and bring a situation under control to ensure that the Belizean people are going to benefit from what is going to be the best cost at the end result. We all know that, and I don't want to go into history in terms of what used to happen and what is happening now. Certainly, there has to be a mechanism. What I would then want to say from a business perspective is that when we create these type of, using your words, monopoly, then it must be ensured then and enshrined in law that there's a mechanism to check and balance every single importation that comes in, that it does not cost the Belizean public more than what was expected to be costing. And that mechanism, if it's hinged on foreign prices established on the world market, then there should be an established rate that is used to now say it's whatever is on the market plus X that gives you the final price. If that is enshrined in law and it's to be followed and somebody is enforcing that, a department that is enforcing it, then we are, from that standpoint, we ought to then feel safe. It's when we have enforcement that is broken down is when it becomes a challenge for us as Belizeans. Marissa, you could.
All right. Let me pose another question unless. All right. Allow us guests to bring in Minister Castro because he's dealing with some traffic issues that's important. So, Minister Castro,
sure.
Welcome back.
Okay.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning again.
Yeah.
I am calling to report on the situation in St. Margaret on the Hummingbird Highway. It is completely impossible for vehicular traffic. The diversion at St. Margaret is completely underwater, and we are hoping that during the course of today, if the rain stops, Ministry of Works might be able to get in there and deal with the damage assessment and see how quickly we can open that portion of the highway now. But no vehicular traffic can traverse between Dangriga and Belmopan. So we're asking for those who have no need or not a great need to be on the highway to stay put, and in order for us to give Ministry of Works time to get in there with heavy equipment to see what kind of assessment we'll be able to do and how soon we can open it. No? This situation, we will continue to have climate change and so on. We need to prepare for it. It's a new time, and this is the situation that we find ourselves in with massive flash flooding during the different parts of the country.
All right. Can you give the exact location again, please?
St. Margaret on the Hummingbird Highway.
All right.
The diversion bridge at St. Margaret. There's a new bridge that is being installed currently that is above water. That one is above the flooding situation, but the diversion for you to pass it's impossible. It's completely underwater.
So are you saying that if a person absolutely must get to Belmopan, that they have to go through the coastal road in order to get there and to avoid the hummingbird?
That will not be advisable because remember there's a bridge that has been compromised at St. Matthews.
All right, good.
So there's that will not be that will
Yeah,
be
that's
definitely impossible. And also at this time with this type of flooding coming through at St. Margaret and St. Matthews, the coastal highway will definitely be compromised and will be under flooding situation as well.
All right. So if you're in the south, it's better that you stay south for right now.
In the Belize City area, stay there. In the Belmopan western side, stay there.
All right.
At this time.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much for that update,
No
sir.
problem.
Yeah. Very good. Let's take the break and come back. We're talking with representatives of the Belize Chamber of Commerce. It's now 8:31. With representatives from the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we have the president, Mr. Nikita Usher, also Ms. Longsworth, their legal advisor, and Mr. Usher, one of their members. The other Mr. Usher, Mr. William Usher, one of their members. We want to go now to some of the suggestions that you have made regarding the stabilization measures that you have advised. One of them being a tax relief on fuel, especially for agriculture and for transport. We know that this is a major source, as Ms. Coy brought up this morning about tax. This is a major source by which government is able to bring in quick finance. We saw that fuel went up as well as the butane went up, and those monies definitely goes into government coffers. Your suggestion is that there should be some relief in that area. Can you elaborate on that and how practical you think that will be? I direct it to the president. Maybe we could start with the president.
Let me start up in saying that the initiative that we have here is only among so many. There's a long other list of what we're doing. What the chamber has been doing is to look at initiatives that would keep our business operational. And particularly when we look at some of them, you're looking at some of the smaller and medium-sized businesses. These are not by any long shot of the long list. I mean, this is only a few. You have now touched on one that you've gone at fuel, which every time we discuss these topics, the discussion always leads towards, but government needs that revenue. How will they then offset it if you're trying to grow an economy? And I will start, I think each one of us will handle the topic on our own, but I will start with make one statement, that the economy is grown by private sector, particularly, and not necessarily by government. And so the environment in which the private sector operates under must be conducive to have business operate, and therefore when business operate and do well, taxes then become even greater for government. The topic that you have brought is fuel, and I will leave William to go into this for you, but it is a topic that is nearest to us, and this is not a COVID topic. This has been a discussion with government long before COVID.
Exactly.
That if you are able to level the playing field on fuel, where you can have predictability, we are sure that agriculture and agro-productive sector can perform. I will leave it there and have William take it from there.
Yeah. This area, Nuri, and the general public is very important, and I like to discuss this in relation to myself and the business and the area that we operate in, simply because we consider ourselves at this time a manufacturing business, but we also is cognizant of the fact that we are a small company. And very much of our business works within the agricultural area and for the agriculture sector. In that sector, practically 30% of the cost of doing business is energy costs. And that could be fuel, that could be electricity, that could be butane, but in essence, 30% of that cost is energy, and fuel is a major portion of that. The problem we have in the agriculture sector and within the manufacturing sector is the instability of these prices continue going up, going down, going up. It's very hard to predict, and it's very hard to be able to plan within your business. And as the president rightly say, the private sector is the one that drives the economy. And if we ourselves can't predict properly and how we are going due to the issue of fuel, that becomes a problem in doing business. But the whole issue of tax relief on policy for agriculture is under this situation, and as I say, as we rightly say from the beginning, not only COVID, because our economy have been plagued with many different disasters, natural disasters, non-natural disasters. Again, we are in the COVID time, and look what is happening in terms of the flooding situation today. But what we are saying is fuel have been a big issue, and the agriculture sector have been lobbying and crying out for relief in this area, because you simply cannot produce with the high costs that exists on fuel, and tax is a big area of that, right? And if we are able to find ways to reduce that, to strategize or on how to make that a relief within the agriculture sector, we can produce more. And by producing more, we can enable our production sector to start exporting more. Exporting more eventually bring that money on the back end. And so sometimes we need to think out the box, and we need to think long term to be able to bring back our economy. And in this area, that's what we are talking about. And that goes for the transportation sector. Look at what is happening right now within the transportation sector. They're clamoring for increasing increasing the bill for passengers, for example, but it's an issue of cost to them as well. And fuel is the major cost, for example, in the bus industry. It's more than 50% of the cost. So how do you deal with that issue if you don't have a fuel tax relief policy? And the chamber is very much unwilling and able to sit down with the government in looking at these areas.
All right.
Right, and if I could just add my 2 cents here, if we really look at this from a bigger picture as well, even the consumer, the average Belizean, feels the effects of fuel policy and fuel costs. From a pro-business perspective, if a business has to pay high taxes on fuel just for inputs before it actually even produces a product that can go on the shelf, then that automatically means that by the time they transport it to the shelf, the cost is going to be high. How does a local product compete with a US product or a Mexican product that their government subsidized their tax inputs at the beginning, so that by the time it got to the shelf, in some cases, how can we look at the back of a can of something and see that it was made in Thailand and got all the way to Belize and is still cheaper than Belizean goods? That means that within our own country, we're not doing something to make ourselves competitive. And increasingly so for the average consumer, if a consumer has to even take their vehicle or take a bus to the supermarket to go and buy these local products, there's an added cost there as well. And we can tie all all of those things back to fuel policy.
All right, understand what all three of you said, but I'm still not getting a practical suggestion to government as to how they are going to replace that tax, that income that they are dependent on from fuel, and giving the relief to that sector of agriculture and transportation, as you said, has been on the table for so many years, long before COVID, and there has been no relentless, or there's been no relief on the part of government extended to these two sectors. In addition, bus drivers are saying that the only way that they can keep the cost of transportation down is for them to get this relief from government. If not, then they have to raise the cost of traveling on the bus. They've also gone beyond fuel and said that, you know, it's tires and spare parts and all of these other matters. So I'm wondering, what practically can you say to government to not have them go in the direction of trying to make money off these, off the fuel and in fact everything else, and keep agriculture pretty much in the same spot it has been in for many years? I'm not hearing the practical.
But I think we have to go in a direction. You're trying to solve a problem with one issue. Government's problem is not just the revenues that government collect is not only from fuel tax. Government collect taxes across the spectrum of this nation. But the easiest one to collect from is always fuel.
Exactly.
Because it's the one that you walk to the pump and that will have a tax, and it's almost automatic, because pretty much I would want to guess, venture a guess here, almost 90% of our people will use that fuel in some shape or form. But what we have to always look at is the comprehensive view, and this is what we've been saying for some time. Let's look at enforcement of tax laws. If we were able to collect what is due to the government of Belize for taxes, we've been saying this for some time, that, for example, GST would not need to be 12.5%. So to bridge the issue that you asked earlier, to bridge the fuel tax, we have to do a comprehensive overview to ensure that all Belizean businesses are paying their fair share of taxes across the board. When you are able to collect all the taxes, you can then look at a policy now to reduce fuel tax being one, and that's a policy that we are promoting in the first world countries that's subsidized by their government. Ms. Marissa earlier mentioned to you, how is it that goods can arrive in Belize all the way from Thailand in this case, and we could use the Far East for many reasons, and these goods can be cheaper than what we actually produce in Belize. But yet we are promoting buying Belize product, but the Belizean that go on the shelf is seeing a product that is next to ours produced in Belize for a far lesser price. It's because of policies such as fuel tax policy and many other ones, subsidies that are offered by their government to ensure that manufacturing sector, agricultural sector are productive and can provide the relevant jobs, one, but two, taxes fully for government. The more you allow them to operate, the more taxes can come forth to the government of Belize. When you stifle the environment, when you make the taxes so high, businesses cannot continue to operate. William offered a suggestion of 30%. I would want to tell you that it might be even higher than 30% in some businesses. How can we operate with that type of environment? But it has to be a government that is looking at private sector as an integral part of the economy. When we believe that the government is the economy, we will face these types of situations that we have to do.
All right. Let's move on to a number of your suggestions to government. And we'll ask you at the end if you're getting a good reception from government in regards to your suggestions. But you focus quite a bit on SME, the small and micro enterprises. And one of the things that you're asking for is a subsidy program for these small businesses. Uh, please elaborate on that, and please again let's deal with the practicality of a suggestion that there be monies being paid to employees that are working for small enterprises. How practical is that, given the fact that we're hearing about 80,000 persons that are in need of assistance, and most of those are still, many of those are still not able to tap into that. How practical is your suggestion that SME employees, small micro enterprise employees, be given some level of relief? And maybe we start with Mr. Esha, who falls into the category of an SME.
Go ahead, Marissa.
Right. Well, the reason why we've put such a focus not only on SMEs, but micro is also included as well for grants, is because by definition, and I don't have it in front of me, but based on the definitions of the number of employees and the earnings per annum of a company, many of Belize's businesses fall within the MSME categorization. And so we have to also be aware of that when we go on the international stage to have trade negotiations and so on. We are really an MSME country when we go and have negotiations with countries that are industrialized with much bigger companies. The way that we have looked at these recommendations, and I think I'll have to take your question head on, Mr. Nouri, because I know that at the end of the day, what you're asking is, all of this that we're recommending takes money. Where does the money come from? Now, had we as a country been saving and using our surpluses in the past to address some of these issues, we would not be in such a desperate position today. But being in a desperate position at this point in time, what we're trying to say is that this is like, these requests is like what a pantry would be for business. Business is hungry. Business is struggling to survive at this point in time. And so the same way that we're able to bring some kind of provisions together for individuals, there has to be bringing provisions together for businesses as well. Imagine that we're 3 months into the pandemic and there has been no relief provided even for the micro, the one-person businesses that exist out there. And when you mention about the provision that's being made for the unemployed, we have to look at the irony, Mr. Nouri, of providing for unemployment and not providing for stimulation of employment by way of business. Because if we are because employment can remain the same, people can remain unemployed until you provide alternative ways for them to make income, whether that is to stimulate businesses to rehire or to hire more, or you invest in innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship to allow more small businesses to open. If we continue to prioritize making provisions solely for unemployment, meaning to sustain those who are unemployed without investing in those other aspects, which is what we're asking for in this pantry that we've requested, then we're going to find that forever this government will have to, or any government will have to be making provision for unemployed persons and not for plans and schematics that can be put in place to boost employment overall and pull those people out of that situation.
And let me go, Nuri, on that. Just simple, looking at the tacos vendors. The tacos vendors basically, at the beginning of this pandemic, were closed off. They couldn't do anything. They were home. And we are saying, okay, they're unemployed. What we have to recognize is each tacos vendor has normally 2 to 3 employees within that little cart area. So when you don't have those people, when you don't stimulate them to be out there, that's 2 to 3 people. It's not one. It might seem you say a tacos vendor, but a tacos vendor is actually 3 employment, and sometimes that's 3 households. So we need to be able to stimulate those business and having those business on the ground and other business because it creates the employment. So that $150 are just simply saying provide the environment for them to operate. Open up the environment, allow them to do like what they did in the end. Okay, you could come, but you have to be in a yard and not on the street side. That's a part of stimulation. So automatically, instead of paying for these people who were unemployed, you know, created that environment for them to employ themselves. That is basically in a nutshell what we are saying.
You know, William, you should have gone one more step further. The employment of the tacos vendor has linkages vertical and horizontal as well. The tortilla factory has to stay open for them to provide that tortilla. How much do they have employed?
Absolutely.
The vegetable people and all the rest that goes into making a taco. So there's an employment that is across the board. Now, when government does not make that stimulant available for businesses to operate, it means then that they have to be paying for it in an unemployment base. If you allow for it, you could have diverted that fund to the small business entity, and directly you would have affected 3 to 5 to 6 to 7 households without having them to pay it out as unemployment. What we're trying to do, brother, is the other direction. We cannot continue to have the businesses not functional. We cannot only be looking at unemployment, because unemployment can be reduced, as Ms. Marissa said earlier, if we are able to have the businesses operational.
I don't think we're hearing
I'm hearing you,
Mr. Nori.
Here. Are you hearing me now?
Now we're hearing you.
Yes, sir.
All right, excuse our technical problems there. And we're getting very close to the end here, but before we get to your closing comments, it's obvious in looking at your suggested measures, the stabilization measures, that you're really focusing on small businesses, different than when Mr. Usher and Ms. Kay was here earlier, where they dealt with a more macro look at this thing. You now seem to be really focusing on, and I hear you mentioning the taco vendor. I'm pretty sure that the taco vendors are not members of the Chamber of Commerce, but here you are focusing on trying to find relief for them. And one of the things that you are suggesting in your stabilization measure is to find grants, monies that would be put into these businesses for their survival. I'd like all three of you to elaborate on that, because that money, again, has to come from somewhere in order to be put as grants to assist these small, and I assume that you're still talking about taco vendors and hair braiders and small micro businesses.
Let me just make two clarifications, Brother Nuri. Mr. William used for you an example of a taco vendor.
Yeah.
It's only an example to show you the connectivity between a small business person and how it affects unemployment.
It must be that you have some interest in looking out for those small persons. If you remember, that was a part of the conversation with you, Ms. Kay, and myself.
And my point of view here, we also have
really
small businesses in our sector as well. And so when Ms. Kay and I spoke to you, we were talking to you macro indeed.
Yes.
But what I've said earlier to you is that this is only a few of the long list of items that we've provided. So we've looked at all sectors. This is not just, you're only seeing a small list of what we've sent out.
Yeah, but your eight measures that you sent to me here, most of them are in fact dealing with small businesses.
And that's because the week that we're dealing with is that sector. There's other sections that you'll be dealing with. Now, the issue that you keep raising, and I think we should out that fire very quickly, is where will that money come from? In a nutshell, you're asking us where will government get that money from?
Yes.
I keep hearing that discussion. But you know, Brother Nuri, when we started off COVID, you could have recalled the Prime Minister saying that would have had X million from this entity, X million from another entity.
Right.
In a nutshell, totally close to, I don't even remember the number, $100 million.
Yes.
A government that is in tune with what is happening across the entire spectrum would have been able to now say that, you know, of that amount of money coming from IFIs, and I do know that there are requirements in some instances, X% will go to unemployment, X% will go to health measures, X% will go to stimulus of businesses. That's a responsible, comprehensive view of how will you look at your entire economy. It cannot just be all going into one sector, and I'm not picking any specific one. All money can't go to unemployment, because unemployment will be there until we get the business sector going. And that's where we're hitting. Stimulus packages have to be looked at for the business sector if we want to stimulate businesses and grow the economy and reduce unemployment in the long run. So you asked the question, where will it come from? It comes from, if, as we said earlier, if government was doing their savings and they're putting away for rainy days, as we all do as a family member, that is not there, but we're against the wall now. Monies are coming from IFIs. What is the policy on how will those money be spent? BCCI continues to push for what is our agenda. We feel that the business community have to be looked at. Now, in terms of the grant, I just answered where that will have come from. A percentage of it has to now go into DFC, the credit unions, wherever we want to put it, so that it can have accessibility for small businesses to continue to operate. Whether it be to expand or to try and come up with new ideas, whatever it is, the business community has to be afforded the opportunity to operate if we're to get the economy moving.
All right. Well, just so that we can take advantage of the time, I'll ask the last question and then we'll get some closing comment. The Belize Tourism BTIA did a poll in which they asked their members about the opening up of the Philip Goulston International Airport, and the impression we got from their report on that survey is that most of their members were sort of split, and that they were leaving it up there to the government to decide the timing for opening up the Philip Goulston Airport. The Belize Hotel Association, as you know, did a poll of their members, and they got a much more clear, distinct position from their members, which are basically coming out with the airport should be open and not giving it at some distant time, but as quickly as possible, as long as certain health measures are put into place. I'd like to know the position of the chamber on this very important matter when we consider that the figures are that over 60% of our economy is based on tourism, and that opening up the airport and opening up other areas of allowing tourists to come in is a major way in which we will get the economy going back. And some of these polled hoteliers are also saying that failure to do that means that they are going to start letting go people, which is a veiled threat about how they're going to look at the delay in opening up the PGIA. I'd like to hear the president as well as the legal person, Miss Longsworth, to weigh in on this very touchy area here of timing for opening up the airport as well as the rest of the borders of interest.
No, Brother Nuri, let's start off with saying this. I think we have been on record in saying that tourism contributes between 40 to 45% of the Belize's GDP. We have also been on record in saying there is no sector that can bridge that default or that loss of revenue for the Belizean economy in such a short period of time. Insofar as saying that, then, I think indirectly, without saying it in such language, we have to have tourism back in our economy. I don't know if we have said that in no other uncertain terms, that is clear. Incidentally, the president of the Hotel Association sits on the chamber board. So we are well aware of what is happening there. Now, with respect to BTIA's, what they did, be careful of how a survey is done, and be careful of how much people participated in a survey to draw a conclusion. In the case of BHA, Hotel Association, you notice Mr. Tejada spent time to explain how they devised their questionnaire. Who participated in the questionnaire? It's the top 80% contributors of revenue that participated, that drove the response to what we got yesterday. I'm not too certain how BTIA was done, but I would only caution to say that we must be careful when we draw conclusions from a survey, how much participation there was and how was the question drawn. With respect to the GDP, I continue to insist that we are forced, we're boxed in a corner where we don't see any other way that Belize's economy can rebound without having some contribution from tourism. We caution, however, that if we're to consider such, it has to be with some serious protocol. And you've noticed how the BHA has addressed those quick rapid tests, and we all know the problem with that as well. So there has to be a balance between opening up and what will be expected when tourists comes back. We stand on that position.
All right. I still don't draw from you early compared to late opening up of the airport, but I'll hear from Ms. Longsworth as well as Mr. Usher, the other Mr. Usher.
Thanks, Mr. Nuri. And I would like to say that I would hope to be seen less as legal advisor and more as vice president of the services sector. The legal advisor can add some to your shoulders, you know, but some extra weight. But in my capacity as vice president of the services sector, tourism falls flat within my portfolio. It has, of course, been, since day one, has been the sector that has cried out. Remember that the effects of this were felt even prior to the actual lockdown happening. So when some of the businesses that are not directly, or individuals that are not directly in tourism, comment on the reopening of tourism, there has to be an understanding that almost from as early as January, there were red flags. And then by February, March, because the rest of the world had a jump start in the COVID impact, we as a country were feeling it from then. So we have had several months of little to no income in our main income earner. That's like losing the breadwinner of your house, or the breadwinner that worked for 5 days a week can now just work for 2 days a week, and so brings in much less income into your household. That's what's happening with our household as a country. The income has become extremely limited, and worse, the foreign exchange income has become limited, and we use that foreign exchange income to buy close to everything that we consume. And so we have to be very aware, as the president said, that we have been backed into a bit of a corner. Tourism was built to be this big, and we were happy for the successes of the greatness of the tourism industry. We then have to accept the harder side of that, which is that when things like this happen, we have an industry that requires us to make some very hard decisions, while still trying to balance the health and the economic aspect of things. Of course, when we look at what the results of the Belize Hotel Association has been, it definitely shows that even in light of the need for earning in the tourism industry, the hoteliers are still very precautious about how it's going to be handled. A big part of this, in all of the studies and data I've read from overseas with other economies opening, has to also do with public trust and confidence in the process that's being taken. Maybe it will take the government doing a tour of the airport and showing Belizeans all the steps that the tourists will have to go through before they step on free soil, in order for us to feel comfortable that there is a mechanism for control as much as possible. Because we have, for example, Jamaica reopening, we have other countries reopening, so we have some best practices we can look at. And then we also have the luxury of coming a little later so that we can learn from some of the mistakes. Jamaica reopened, but on one of the first days of reopening, a lady collapsed and died in the customs hall. So, there's shock factors that come with certain things that we have to consider. But if we have a plan, if we have confidence that if someone falls ill in the airport, there is a specific facility, those are things that make the situation a little more bearable, I believe, by the average person. That's why cases 19, 20, 21 in controlled circumstances have obviously had less alarm and inflammation in the community than the past ones where people were freely roaming. So there is a level and an extent of caution and the red flags that go up. And so our best bet is to, as a private sector and government, is to control the red flags as much as possible.
All right, Ms. Vice President, who is an attorney, so we appreciate your input likewise.
That's right. A bit of free legal advice pops in now and again,
Indeed. All right, let's get Mr. William Usher to weigh in on that, and then we'll get a final closing word from the President, Mr. Nikita Usher. Mr. William?
Yeah, I won't deliberate long on this, in that the President and Marissa have basically given a nutshell what we think. My only point here is also to recall and remember that the airport serves not just for tourists. There is business that occur through the airport as well, that collapsed due to the airport closing. And so we have to look at that if we are going to stimulate and allow for the country to come back. Along with that, the whole issue of tourism, there's a vertical and horizontal aspect to when a tourist comes in. All the businesses that occurs due to that as well. And these are the things we need to look at. There is a health aspect in the country, and there is an economic aspect in the country. We just simply can't look at one of them. We have to be looking at both of them together, because even if we close all our borders and maintain and keep them closed, we do not have the finance to sustain our population and sustain the businesses within the country. And so the only way that will occur is for allowing in time these ports of entry to be open. Yes, we have to be on the air of caution and the measures that needs to be put in place for people to be satisfied, not only in Belize but for those who are coming in, because the tourists will not just come in because you open that airport. They need to be satisfied that by them coming in Belize, they are safe, and they will be safe throughout their whole stay. And so these are the preparative issues that within the country needs to be there, and that allows these tourists to understand that they are safe in country as well. But the issue of business with these port opening, business cannot occur if it's not open. Even for those businesses who produce goods and services in Belize, they need inputs from outside, and the only way those inputs can come in is through these port of entry. So we have to look at the economic aspect of why the port must be open.
All right. we'll have to use that as the last comment that all three of you were able to bring in. I want to thank you all for being with us this morning. It's an ongoing conversation. I feel like this is part 2 of what you and Ms. K. Menzies was talking about, Mr. Usher. So we appreciate and hope that there will be another opportunity to get an input from the BCCI and how you see and evaluate things. These measures, these 8 measures, stabilization measures, have been shared with government, and you've been doing a media run to elaborate on them, and we appreciate the fact that you are doing so. So thank you, Mr. Nikita Usher. Thank you, the Vice President, Ms. Longsworth, who is also an attorney, and thank businessman, Mr. William Usher, for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Brother
Thank you,
Nuri.
Mr. Nuri. Thanks for the opportunity.
Very good. And we have only enough time to thank William. No, we have Anthony Grant downstairs. We have Mr. Cliff upstairs, as well as Jada Anderson and Christy Flowers as our director and camera person this morning. We have just enough time to thank you for being with us for the entire broadcast. So Belizeans, stand strong and stay firm. For now, we gone.
Wake up, Belize. 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 Another day is here. Wake up, Belize. Wake up, Belize. We gotta keep moving. Na 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 na. Wake up, Belize.